This episode discusses mental health struggles, including challenges related to trauma, discrimination, and suicidal ideation. Please listen with care and take breaks if needed.
Just even the news cycle, right? Policy is something that completely impacts our lives. The way that many of the identities, even currently, are being targeted by politicians, by influential leaders, it leads to negative mental health consequences. Like, it's really, people in power should want to be supportive and protect all communities, not give them more barriers and more things to stress about.
Welcome to the Queerest Podcast, your cosmic guide to the queer universe. Hosted by Andre BVR, each episode takes you on an interstellar journey through queer culture, identity, and influence. From dismantling media tropes to exploring queer representation, we invite you to challenge norms and expand your horizons. So buckle up and set your phasers to fabulous. Close encounters of the queerest kind await.
Greetings, cosmic queers and allies. Welcome to the Queerest Podcast, your interstellar guide through the vastness of queer existence. I'm your host, Andre BVR, and today we are tackling a critical topic: mental health in LGBTQ plus communities, especially for queer youth. According to the Trevor Project's 2024 U.S. National Survey, 39% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered suicide in the past year, and 12% of those attempted it. Yet half of those who want mental health care cannot access it, facing barriers like cost, a lack of affirming providers, and a fear of discrimination. Our guest today has spent years working to change that. Juan Acosta is a first-generation Mexican immigrant and a nationally recognized mental health advocate. He's worked with the Biden administration, Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, and organizations like Mental Health America and NAMI to push culturally competent care, especially for LGBTQ+, Latinx, and immigrant communities. He's spoken at the White House, the United Nations, and mental health summits across the country, and co-authored the New York Times bestselling book, Channel Kindness, with Lady Gaga and other Born This Way Foundation reporters. Juan's work has been recognized by the Advocate's 30 Under 30, Stat News' Status List, and most recently as a 2024 Young Innovator in Behavioral Health. He's dedicated his life to ensuring mental health services are accessible, affirming, and inclusive for all. Juan, welcome to the Queerest Podcast. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So let's start off a little bit with like the beginning of kind of your journey around activism. You know, your journey as a mental health advocate started remarkably young at just 13 years old. Many people obviously don't find their activism until like later in life, but you were so like aware of what was happening and kind of took action. What was kind of like that first motivation to have you speak out specifically around mental health and LGBTQ rights at such a young age?
For me, talking about mental health and beginning my work was more of a necessity to survive. It was not something that I really had planned out. There was no strategy behind it, but I was just in a really dark place in my life at that time, getting bullied because of my identity. And what led me to start my work was I wanted to live. And I began speaking up and getting involved in community efforts for that reason. And it naturally took a life of its own. And I realized how important it is to speak openly about mental health. And it can be scary at first, but it's something that we need to do. And once I began speaking about it and doing the work, I realized that there's a lot of people who feel the same way, who go through the same things, and who are facing the same challenges and receiving that support and care. And it really changed my life and helped me heal, but also it gave me my purpose in life and my passion, which is to make sure that I'm doing what I can to use my voice, my platform to support the cause and ensure that other young LGBTQ plus members have the support that maybe I didn't have at that age.
Amazing. Like the levels of self-awareness and also just like your ability to take your personal struggle and turn it into kind of a personal mission, I think is so impressive and truly inspiring. And, like that advocacy, that passion for advocacy obviously led you to make history in your hometown, correct? In 2018, you drafted Woodland, California's first LGBTQ plus proclamation, which passed unanimously, something that hadn't failed in previous attempts. What did that victory mean to you, and what impact did that have on kind of your wider community?
I mean, that victory, I think till this day, you mentioned some of my work when you were introducing me, but till this day, I think that's one of my favorite things that I've ever done. Growing up in this town, there was a lot of things that I felt that negatively impacted me, feeling like people were against my community, right? And I did not feel welcomed. And before I moved out for school, I wanted to do something to change that. And I emailed the city manager and I was like, hey, can we do this? And then they asked me to draft the language for the proclamation. And I had no idea what that entailed, but I stayed up. I was like, I need to make sure I get this done. I stayed up researching how to do that. And so I did it. I sent it over and they had an open comment session. People were going to speak against it and for it. And it passed unanimously for the first time. And to me, seeing people come out for the first time and declaring themselves to be members of the community was something that really left a mark in me. And also seeing people rejoice and cry after and just really hug to have that message of acceptance and affirmation in their own community meant a lot, because at the end of the day, I wasn't the only member of the community here, right? And there was other people who really needed that message to feel like they belonged here. And it's stuff like that, having those affirming spaces and messages that can save someone's life. And now it's every year they have the proclamation now, and they have a parade now. Like, it's a smaller parade. We're not a big city. It's a smaller city, but they have a parade. They have the demonstrations, and seeing that after that passed for the first time has been the coolest thing, just knowing that something and some effort like that can lead to that change and can provide a more inclusive environment for others.
That's incredible. Like, the impact is still being felt today from that. So, like, honestly, congratulations to you. And like, I think being able to be the one that is trailblazing in a small community like that, I think is important, because we need leaders who are outspoken and visible, and you are definitely that. So I think that's really fantastic and inspiring. And it's obviously clear, like, your personal story is deeply intertwined with your advocacy. And so, like, as a first generation Mexican immigrant, you've often spoke about the importance of culturally competent mental care. How has your background shaped your mental health activism, particularly within Latinx and immigrant communities?
Yeah, I mean, my background, my culture has shaped my career entirely, and my experience in advocacy. For me, it's always been important for me to do the research, right? To stay informed, to speak to other communities, and to get that other perspective, right? I think it's so important to consistently and always keep learning. But my experience gave me a very unique lens in the way that my parents never spoke about mental health when we were growing up. And it was something that we didn't touch on. We never spoke about our feelings. And even the term mental health was not something I even knew about until I started struggling and I started Googling, like, why am I feeling this way? Or I started speaking to a school counselor, right? And that's how I was able to really discover what was going on with me. But in terms of the terminology that we use for depression, anxiety, none of that was previously discussed in my household. And when I spoke to my parents about it, it took them a while to really understand and grasp what all of that meant. And it's not a unique case to me. I know it happens in many households where mental health is not a topic of conversation. And if it is, it's something that you want to keep hidden. You don't want to talk about publicly. And for culture specifically, I'm going to speak about Mexican culture. It's dominated by machismo, right? Just this toxic masculinity, defining vulnerability as a weakness when it's in fact a strength. And so for me, having conversations with people of the older generation as well, who come from the same culture, has been really enlightening, because once we're able to have the conversation and start it, they're able to recognize and reflect on their journey themselves. And then they start finding these things and they're like, no, wait, I had anxiety, or I have anxiety, or that part of my life was traumatic. And so it's those missing pieces of education and understanding and really meeting people where they're at that oftentimes we completely oversee in the mental health field. And it's why it's so important that we diversify and have more fit care for those that may not be from this Western society and have those, very different needs.
Yeah, 100% agree. And we know that LGBTQ young people face unique challenges when it comes to mental health. Again, I'll reference the Trevor Project's 2024 survey. I think the stat was half of LGBTQ plus young people needed mental health care but couldn't access it. And, a lot of them cited, affordability as an issue, lack of affirming providers, or fear of being outed by, anybody within that situation. From your experience, though, what do you see as the biggest challenges preventing queer youth from receiving the care that they need?
I think definitely affirming providers is one of them, right? And having a provider that is safe and who actually understands. There's very unique struggles that the community faces that going to just another therapist may not be as supportive because they may not understand you. And that is why, oftentimes when I meet with people from the community and they talk to me about who they're seeing, they always prefer having someone from the community because they understand those specific struggles, right? But more than that, I also see a barrier being our current climate as a society, right? In terms of policy and feeling safe in a system that oftentimes has left us very unsafe. And so that is another area that I think we can do a lot of growing in. And young people specifically, it's hard to seek support when you're not out yet and when you're still living at home and fear the rejection of your family. And so there's places like Trevor Project, right, where you can text and call, and that may feel a little bit more safer because it's a little bit more accessible than telling your parents that you're feeling a certain way because of your identity and that you need to go seek someone to talk to. And that is another layer of complexity that I often see many LGBTQ plus youth face.
Yeah. And I'm curious, can you kind of unpack, our community is really unique in that we face things that kind of our heteronormative peers don't experience? What are the things that would definitely impact mental health care for, LGBTQ youth?
Just even the news cycle, right? Policy is something that completely impacts our lives. The way that many of the identities, even currently, are being targeted by politicians, by influential leaders, it leads to negative mental health consequences. It's really, people in power should want to be supportive and protect all communities, not give them more barriers and more things to stress about. I think that is one thing that makes us very unique in terms of the things that we face, in addition to, of course, the bullying that happens often in schools and even in workplaces at times, right? There's this rejection that the straight counterparts don't often face and the LGBTQ plus community faces on a day-to-day. I always say that being out and pride and all of these things, that is an act of resistance itself, right? It really takes a lot of bravery for people to come out and be their true selves in a society that at times does not welcome in our full identity.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's the more personal local level, it's the interactions of bullying, but then it's the messages that our community is told through the media, like you said, through policymakers who are, making it much more difficult to exist, demonizing our community, criminalizing, just trying to find different ways that they can put us back in the closet. And those type of things have impact on our mental health care. And it's really awful just to see how they are allowing that to be kind of the law of the land. It's why would you want to hurt people who are just trying to exist and live their lives? but that's not how they see it, unfortunately. Obviously another heartbreaking statistic from the Trevor Project survey was that 42% of LGBTQ plus youth feared talking about their mental health, and 37% avoided care because they didn't want to ask for a parent's permission. And this obviously highlights how many structural barriers exist for young people. My question to you is, how can we better support them in seeking help, especially when they feel trapped by these limitations?
I mean, the limitations are so valid, right? You want to feel safe when you seek support. And I think we can better support them, educators, anyone who is in touch with a young person, by providing them resources that may be effective for them, right? Whether it's the Trevor Project, whether it's 988, for resources that are more accessible than going to a therapist and having to get a parent's permission, or even by going into some groups, right? I remember when I was younger that my first ideas of representation came from projects like It Gets Better, the No Hate campaigns, Lady Gaga's Born This Way, that, like, all of these things, right? And media, and these are things that, people in media, influencers, whoever, just by sharing resources and sharing stories of hope, that can create an impact. And also, there's a downside to social media, but I think social media, connecting with other members of the community on social media and seeing people thrive from the community can help them also get that sense of hope that they too can be free and true to themselves and thrive as well.
Yeah. And I think to that point, I think you do such a fantastic job of showcasing your journey, both as a queer person, but also of all the advocacy work that you do online. I think that's so important for you to be visible, to show people that they're like the project says, it gets better, and you are living that. And I think that's so important because it allows for those who are maybe in the closet, those who are new to the community, or even those who have been in the community and still deal with internalized homophobia, can see the work you're doing and the impact you're making in helping bring progress to our country, our culture, and our community. So thank you for that. And I would say continue to do that, because it's so important for our community to see leaders like yourself who are doing this work to make the world better for us.
As well, for platforms like this one, right? You're working on this podcast specifically highlighting efforts of the community. We need all of it, especially now, and so it's a collective effort, and I appreciate all you do as well.
Absolutely. I want to now kind of ask you, for many queer youth, school is one of the first places where they either find support or experience harm, as we kind of already touched on. Nearly 49% of LGBTQ youth aged 13 to 17 reported being bullied in the past year. And those who did were significantly more likely to attempt suicide. How do we address bullying as a mental health crisis, and what steps can schools and communities take to create safer spaces?
I think bullying definitely ties into mental health, negative impacts, right? If you're consistently being harassed in school, and you're going to school to learn, not to be taunted or harassed by your classmates, it can be overwhelming. I myself faced that at the age of 13, and that's why I started this work, right? And it led me to have a lot of negative thoughts and feelings. And what I found helpful was when teachers from the go were speaking openly about respecting everyone, when they would take action and have follow through when someone said that they were getting bullied, and not ignore it, and also have conversations with the school counselors who were really supportive. I think sometimes people think bullying does not impact young people in a tremendous way. They think that people are too sensitive, that their feelings are too large, or that they need to get over it. But they're young people who are experiencing life for the first time. And I consistently get tired of people, specifically from the communities that we're speaking about, always having to live on survival mode, because it feels like that at times, right? Especially when you're a young closeted person, where you're having to survive school, but also sometimes having to go back home to a home that isn't accepting, right? And then maybe you're not even out, but maybe you're hearing your parents or your cousins or siblings speak negatively about a community that you belong to, and they don't even know it yet.
Yeah. And I can speak to my personal experience. Like it was definitely a learning curve for my parents to get on board with me being queer. And, I had one instance of bullying that, I was able to handle, but there are many cases where the situations escalate and it's a lot of unfortunate outcomes. And it, could go from, consistent bullying to sometimes even violence and other forms of escalation there. And I think it's important for schools to make sure that they're protecting their students, to hear when they're needing help and supporting, and also just educating all the students about respect, like you mentioned, because it's about making sure that we are creating a space that's safe for students to thrive, because like you said, it's about going to school to learn, not to be taunted by people and classmates and stuff like that. So I think that's really important. I've obviously cited several different items around kind of the data, but there are some kind of hopeful data points that I can actually point out. And studies have actually shown that LGBTQ youth who live in very accepting communities attempt suicide at less than half the rate of those in unaccepting communities. What role, in your opinion, does community support play in mental health outcomes? And how can we all contribute to creating affirming environments?
I think community is everything in mental health outcomes. We know that community is something we all seek. We all seek to belong, right? Everybody, no matter what identity, sexuality, whatever it may be, we all seek to belong and to have our people that we can lean on, people that we can support and that can support us. And mental health specifically, it's part of the social determinants of health. We need each other. And specifically, when you speak about the LGBTQ plus community, that sense of belonging and representation is even more increased, right? So if someone feels safe around others, they're more likely to do better than someone who does not have that support and who may feel like they're alone. And just any efforts, even in advocacy efforts, right? It's great when someone's able to do something by themselves, but it becomes even more powerful when there's more people behind them. So I think that is something that in life generally is important, but specifically when we talk about the LGBTQ plus community, there is a need for more people who are from the same background to unite in order to push any effort forward. And we've seen it with, even efforts for Pride.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a quick pivot now in our conversation to kind of talk about the work that you've been doing over the years with all of the various organizations you've collaborated. I was on your website and I was just like so impressed. Like y'all visit his website. It's copious. Like there's just so many different organizations, so many different events and initiatives and programs that you've been a part of. That's been so impressive, that have, gone from, nonprofit organizations to governmental agencies, the White House, the United Nations, like I mentioned earlier. Like you are doing so much work and it's so impressive. I'm curious, like from your work with the Born This Way Foundation, NAMI, Mental Health America, obviously it's putting you in a unique position to see different approaches to mental health advocacy. From your collaborations though, like what are some of the most effective mental health initiatives you've seen and what lessons have you learned from them?
I mean, for me, always some of my favorite efforts from these organizations are their youth-focused efforts, when they really bring youth to the table to inform decisions, including policies. And it's important because the policy work and all of these initiatives will impact the youth the most, right? And it's very important that when you're creating things for young people, that they're led by young people, that they're not just given a resource or a source that's already been pre-created without any of their knowledge. When we talk about the LGBTQ plus community or any community generally, the same is to be done with them, right? We are the best messengers. We need to inform people. And what I've seen work best is meeting people where they're at and being open to criticism, because you cannot join a place or an environment and expect everyone just to say yes to everything that you're doing, because that's not how we grow. And so being open to change is really important, and actually being intentional. I don't ever like being in spaces where, I'm there to contribute and then it's just really, to check off a box in whatever agenda that they have, but rather if we're there to share something, to change, then be intentional and do it, right? I think that's the best way to work. I've seen a lot of campaigns be done that have been really impactful, that have had young people message and other members of the community as well, of just feeling seen. And I think that there is such a need for that representation, but also in terms of policy is making sure that we are considering the person's whole identity when trying to provide any sort of care or resources to them. So when we talk about mental health care, we know it looks differently for every single community. And while it can be difficult to have a bunch of resources specifically for all the communities, it's something that we can do if we want to do it, but it takes time. And what we need to do is make sure that we are not trying to get an easy way out just to save us some work. And it's important that we include all of these communities and all of the considerations that go into supporting diverse individuals. When I first started doing my work, a lot of these conversations about LGBTQ plus identities and mental health weren't as common. Right. And that was shocking to me, because then when I started doing it, everyone was saying like, oh, this is trailblazing, or like, and I was like, well, why is this even like trailblazing? I feel like this should have been done already. That was shocking to me. And that it like continued throughout the years. And it's quite beautiful to see the field recognize it more now, even amidst the challenges of the national climate. There's a lot of progress that has been done, and I recognize that. And there's a lot more that we can do, but making sure that we are not shying away from calling things out and from doing what's right and being inclusive is important.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I'm just curious, like, you have been to the White House many times, been a part of mental health summits there. What was that journey? What was that process? How did you get invited? Would love to know kind of the context, and how was it to be in that space?
So I was invited, I think it was in 2022, my first time. I applied for a mental health youth action forum, specifically around youth mental health and specifically for diverse LGBTQ plus youth. For me, it was important to, again, uplift the LGBTQ plus community and the immigrant communities while there. And I was invited to attend, and then they asked me to speak. And so that was actually the scariest thing of my life.
Sure, I can only imagine.
It was an amazing experience. I'm really grateful for that. And I just remember like the night before the actual forum, I was like, I think I'm going to pull out of it. I don't want to do it. What if I mess up? Like all of the, the natural anxiety of it all.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful experience, because that morning I woke up, and as I mentioned before, I came to this country at age 2 from Mexico, immigrated with my parents. And that day I really felt like they were there with me, even though they weren't physically there with me. But it was like this feeling of pride, and for the LGBTQ plus community. So like when I was able to publicly, say my identity, when I was introducing myself, that to me meant a lot, because it also took me back to when I was 13 in need of that support, and to own my identity on a stage like that, and to talk about the importance of making sure that our community has resources and support that are intentional, affirmative, and safe was really important. And so I appreciate that opportunity, and all the opportunities that came after that. It's been life-changing, and I'm just really happy to be in the place I am right now.
That's amazing. And also just building off of that, like you were also at the United Nations too. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about that? That's super interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of the speaking engagements opportunities have been about youth mental health, and specifically about LGBTQ plus youth and next youth. And it's been quite interesting. As I mentioned, there's been a gap, just to say the least, in many of these spaces. And talking about these things and communities generally at these events has provided the people in attendance, specifically the older people who are not as close to our current struggles, the opportunity to learn and to question. Like they're always wanting to learn more. And it's been really cool to see that, because after speaking, there's like follow-ups of, hey, like, what do you think about this? And it's really just cool to see that interest and making sure that they are being more mindful about their efforts. And so for me, going to like the UN or even SAMHSA or the White House, it's always an opportunity for me to just speak the truth, right? Like, we need more of this, and we need, like, you cannot just be sending the wrong messengers. We need messengers that look like us, who actually get us, and who can meet us where they're at. And so it's been a very unique space to be in, and to then have efforts like 988 who are, you know, taking a whole person approach, who are making mental health care more accessible. It's been cool to understand that your voice, my voice, everyone's voice can make a difference if we speak up.
Absolutely agree. So now I want to kind of take us into a little bit more around kind of storytelling and representation. And obviously beyond like traditional advocacy, we know that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools to shift narratives, to reduce stigma. You were a co-author on Channel Kindness with Lady Gaga and other Born This Way Foundation reporters, which so cool. On top of the fact that it was a New York Times bestseller list, like incredible, like amazing. So how do you see storytelling shaping the conversation around mental health, and why is it such an important tool in advocacy?
I think storytelling is everything. Again, it goes back to hope, providing that hope and that joy to people. It could be through a video, right? When you're creating content, it could be through a book, it could be through a song, whatever creative outlet you have. We all have the potential to connect with people on a deeper level. And for me, as I mentioned before, music was something that really helped me when I was going through a dark place. And just that story being told as I listened to the music and hearing other people's testimonial really helped me as well. And so when we talk about advocacy, it's important that while doing all the policy work is, you know, key and crucial, it's also important to provide a sense of hope for those who are going through a difficult time now. And hearing from people who may be from the same community as you, from the same city, from the same culture, whatever it may be, can bring you that sense of hope. And I've been able to do that through my advocacy work, through the book, and also through my online content, where I'm able to share in a more authentic, vulnerable way to people things I may not be sharing on a, you know, written post of some sort. And so it's always been important to me. And I've always loved seeing other people share their stories too. I think I spend more time watching like documentaries and looking at people's like testimonials to try and understand other people's way of thinking as well. I think that's like something that's so unique to just humanity generally. But I often, when I've shared things in the past, get people DMing me, asking or telling me how I did something. And I tell them some more of my experience. And I remember very specifically someone DM'd me on Instagram, and they had told me that they wanted to, you know, come out, and that they didn't know how to tell the parents. And I just told them, you know, do it when you feel safe, and, you know, when you think it's time, and everything will be fine. Your truth is worth living. And they messaged me, I think like 2 months after, and they're like, I did it. I came out, and they were all very accepting and supportive. And that to me, like stuff like that is, I didn't know this person. This person lived in Mexico, but they found me through my social media because of a video I posted. And they were able to come out because in a way, I think that representation connected with them. And that's just one example. There's been like high schooler from Colorado emails me asking for a piece of advice because they were familiar with my work. Stuff like that is so important to people. And I feel like I got that through media when I was growing up. And now we all have social media, right? And it's easier for us to connect with people in that way in storytelling. But in terms of advocacy, it's important to also share the why behind you want a policy to change. or work better for a specific community. It's great to have all the research, but if there's no specific relation to a person as to how it's impacting them personally, it weakens it a little bit. So I always think storytelling plays a big piece in advocacy and life generally, and building that community.
Absolutely agree. Honestly, and I think the fact that people feel such comfort and security, even being able to share that with you, to DM you, somebody who, has never met them, I think it's inspiring, but also really empowering to have our community is wide and it is sprawling and we are in different places around the world. But at the end of the day, we understand what this experience is like, no matter the country, no matter, where we're at. I think it's really important that, people understand that community is where we find power, community is where we find support, and community is what will keep us, chugging along to make greater progress for us as a community, but also as a culture in whole. One thing though I want to say is one of the most difficult challenges that LGBTQ youth face is this constant wave of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. I believe GLAAD said there's currently 250 pieces across the United States that were introduced in state legislatures across the country. Just already 250. It's only February. It's how do y'all? First, how do you have all the time? But also, it's is this really what you need to be working on? We have bigger fish to fry. Why are you attacking a vulnerable, marginalized community? That aside, though, I'm curious. Given that 90% of LGBTQ youth said that recent politics has negatively impacted their mental health, how do we stay informed and engaged, but also protect our mental health? Because as you know, it's only been 20 days or so since this new administration has come in, but it seems like it's been already 2 years with the constant barrage of news, how they're flooding the zone with all of these kind of erratic and irresponsible and sometimes even borderline evil, approaches to managing and governing our country. How do people protect their mental health while still making sure that they understand what's happening and how they can stay engaged?
Yeah, you're kind. You said only 2 years. I feel like it's been 100. But I mean, it's a reality, right? It's difficult to stay informed and to not feel overwhelmed by everything that's happening. However, for me personally, I believe in staying engaged and staying informed. And also, once I recognize my body tensing up where I'm starting to feel really overwhelmed, I take a break. But I think it's more important than ever to stay engaged, but definitely while also taking care of yourself. And it's difficult to read things that are not true, that is a lie, that is really meant to be just negative rhetoric towards a community that really just gives a lot of love to everyone around. It's important that you try to find something that works for you to make sure that you're prioritizing your self-care. For me, I'm gonna read things in the morning, but in the evening, I'm not reading no news. I'm just going to unplug. I'll catch up in the morning. But for me, it's important to always have some kind of balance, or else we're just going to be at all times just stressed out. And it could be really discouraging to be in the place that we're in now. But I'm comforted by knowing that our community has had a lot of progress in the past couple of years. And we've fought in the past, and we were in an even worse place in the past. And I'm not sure what place we're going to end up in after these couple of years, right? But what I do know that we now have more of each other because of our, representation, because of our collective online, etc. And that we now know that our voices can have a greater impact. I always believe that leadership comes from within. Power comes from within ourselves. And as mentioned earlier, community makes that leadership and power even greater. And while there is people in power making some of these decisions, I guess, they can't take the power that we have within ourselves. And that's something that I remind myself consistently on the day-to-day, right? It's this negative headline, but how can we as a community support those around us and look at our local efforts to make sure that we're doing what we can to support our community if our leadership is going to fail us.
Right. Absolutely agree. And I think you made a really good point there is like our community is so immensely resilient. Like we've been through so many different, political battles, whether it was dealing with the AIDS crisis or dealing with Don't Ask, Don't Tell or dealing with, the Defense of Marriage Act. Like there's just been so many different times that we've had to fight for our right to exist. But at the end of the day, it's like our community is just so resilient and we always come together to push our culture forward. And I know that this is going to be a really difficult time for a lot of people, but I think people should take away from this that there is hope, that there is a community there. We are here for each other. We are going to continue to fight for our rights and to protect the rights that we do have. And, this is just one bump in the road, and we will continue to make progress and make the world more inclusive and equitable and equal and all the things that we need to. But this is just one of those roadblocks to getting there. One thing, though, is, a big part of making change is showing people what they can do right now. As you know, many of the listeners would like to help. So they don't know, they don't know where to start. I guess my question to you is like, for those who want to make a difference, what are 3 things or, a handful of things that you'd recommend today that they can do to support LGBTQ mental health advocacy or just in general, like support for the wider community?
I mean, there are many things, right? Support your LGBTQ plus friends, support LGBTQ plus owned business, media, and make sure that you're getting involved in politics. At the end of the day, when we talk about mental health and all of these efforts, it always goes back to policy. And that always, whether it be policy at a national level, at a local level, or even in schools. So if you can get, involved in local policy work, whether it be something similar like a proclamation, whether it be having your first Pride event in your community, whether it be going to your school superintendent and talking to them about what they're going to do to make sure that the LGBTQ plus youth in their schools are being supported and are having a space to be themselves. These are all things that are practical and that are more at a micro level that we can all do because they're more accessible stuff that we can do. And also, if you see a bill that's being passed and you're against it, you can call your senators, hold them accountable, and hold yourself accountable too, to show up for the rest of the community, including trans individuals who are being more targeted through the new administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, I want to kind of look ahead now. And your work is obviously ever evolving. I think now more than ever, your work is really, really important. And I want to know what's kind of like next for you. Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that our listeners should keep an eye out for?
I mean, there's so much that I have, I want to do. And it's like, it keeps me up at night, to be honest. But definitely showing up now, I think more than ever in terms of making sure that I'm doing my part at a local level, community level, and also trying to call out misinformation and making sure that we are providing a contrast to the negative things that are being said about the community online and in some of the policy spaces, because we know, A, it's not true. And by that, I never like being combative with the other side because it's just negative, right? And at the end of the day, for me, I'd rather put out something that is hopeful for people, something that we can all do and not even waste my time on going back and forth with people who may not ever want to understand us. And that is that. Like, it's so important for me to be more vocal than ever, to show up and to be more supportive to all members of the community, whether it be on my platform, collaborate more with people. I'm writing a book as well, so I'm excited for that. And there's just a lot of more like policy specific items that I want to make sure that I'm doing where I'm at now. I live in California, and although we're pretty safe, we can also do a little bit more work in certain areas. So just really excited for all of that. And also to provide support to other members of the community. I think we're now at a point where we all kind of have to lean on each other. And if we're really a community, how we profess to be a community, we need to show up for every single member of our community during these times.
I agree. Absolutely. Well, that concludes our interview segment 1, but now I would love for us to go into the compulsory questions. These are questions that I like to ask all of the guests that come on the Queerest podcast. They're more kind of fun and personality based, but however you want to respond, you can just answer, or if you want to add context, we love context here, so feel free. But the first question I have for you is, what is your go-to queer anthem that never fails to get you pumped?
It's definitely Born This Way by Lady Gaga. I think that was my anthem. It was released, I think I was 13 at the time. And I remember like learning the whole choreo from that song when it was released. So that one, and in Spanish, Todos Me Miran by Gloria Trevi.
Oh, I love that one. Yes. Question. How was it being able to fall in love with this song that meant so much to you and then collaborate with the artist whose song that you love? Like, what was that experience like?
Well, that was like, wow. That was another like pinch me moment. That was awesome. It was like a full circle moment. For me, it's always like, specifically in that opportunity, I was like, this is for like my younger self. That song, more than like just a song, it was something that gave me a message of hope and acceptance. Just how we were speaking about storytelling earlier, it was at a time where I was trying and seeking representation and feeling seen. And that song was able to do that for me. And to then later, as I got older, be a part of the book and collaborate so closely with her organization, with her mom. I'm just grateful. It was and is an honor.
That's amazing. Just a quick side note. I actually was able to attend a Lady Gaga 7 listening party a few months ago, and actually was able to meet Lady Gaga too, which was just like, again, kind of a pinch me moment for sure. And I heard about like 7 of the songs because she was just showing the team that I was with the songs. It's so good, by the way. So for those who, hopefully whenever this comes out, the Lady Gaga album should also be out. So go listen to it. Mayhem. It is so good. But let's go into the next question. If your identity came with a warning label, what would it say?
Direct.
Yes. I love that. Next question. If you could have a queer superpower, what would it be?
Voguing. I'd be battling on voguing, I guess. I don't know.
I love that. That's a great superpower. And then what is your favorite piece of queer content right now? And this could be a film, a TV show, a podcast, a book, anything that you're really loving right now that you'd love the queerest community to be aware of.
Not even gonna lie, I watch Drag Race like
yes,
a lot.
You love Drag Race.
So Drag Race, yeah, Drag Race. RuPaul's Drag Race.
Honestly, like I watch it probably way too much, but like it can pull me out of like any funk that I'm in. Just like putting on any episode from any season, like the queens are doing some really good work, and like it's so inspiring to see people who are visible members of our community who look good doing it and who are like really like impressive all around entertainers. So love Drag Race, and I'm obsessed with this season right now. Are you keeping up with it?
Yeah, I am. I love it. I'm like watching Untucked, all of the behind, like everything. To me, it's like you said, it's an escape, right? Just seeing people like perform and take you to this like fantasy world. But I just love seeing their passion too, and their dedication to their craft is always so cool to see people who are like passionate and unapologetic about it.
Yeah. Follow-up question to that, actually. Do you have a top 3 in mind of who you want to win potentially?
No, I'm torn right now. I'm like, it's hard because mine changes every week, but I'll give you my all-time favorite queen, Valentina. She just had it for me. Yeah.
We love Valentina. Amazing. And then the next question is, if you could give your younger queer self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Be kinder to yourself.
Yeah. I think that's a really good one. I think like we are so hard on ourselves with all the information and stuff that we hear and all the media that we consume that kind of has a lot of negative connotations and you know, all the stuff in the media with all of the policy changes. we have to remember that we need to be kind. And I think that's a really important message to share for your younger self. And for those listeners out there, to remind themselves that you have to give yourself some grace. Like, life is difficult. Life is ever changing and complex and messy. But at the end of the day, like, give yourself the grace to learn and change and evolve and, you know.
And like, there's really nothing wrong with you. I think that was my thing when I was growing up, where it's like, oh, it's so bad for me to be myself, where there's something wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong. And so just reminding yourself that if you're feeling like there's something wrong with you, or like you can't be yourself, just know that there's nothing wrong with being who you are.
Because you were what? Born this way.
I love it.
Amazing. Juan, I want to take a moment to say thank you so much for this conversation. Obviously, not just for being here, but all of the work that you do every single day, amplifying voices, breaking down barriers, and making mental health care more accessible for LGBTQ youth. This conversation has been such an important reminder that mental health struggles do not happen in a vacuum. The statistics we talked about today aren't just numbers. They represent real people in our country who are struggling, and often in silence. And as we heard, it's not that LGBTQ youth are inherently more at risk, but it's that society too often fails to give them the safety, the support, and the care that they deserve. But there is hope, folks. We know that when LGBTQ young people have access to affirming spaces, supportive communities, mental health resources, the risk of suicide is cut in half. And that means every single one of us has a role to play in making the world a safer, more supportive place. Whether that's checking in on a friend, advocating for better mental health policies, or simply just showing up and letting young people know that they are seen and valued. So for those that are listening, if you take one thing away from this conversation, let it be this: you matter, your voice matters, and your presence in this world matters. And no one, absolutely no one, should struggle with that alone. Juan, I want to thank you so much again for this conversation, for sharing your story, and for being a positive and powerful advocate for change. I know this conversation will resonate with so many people, so I want to thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this episode, folks. Thank you again for tuning in.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Queerest Podcast. Thank you for joining us on this cosmic journey through the queer universe. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your chosen family. Your voice helps grow the queerest community. Until next time, stay curious.